Greetings. I'm Mark Kennedy, Director of the WABA Institute for Strategic Competition at the Wilson Center. Today I am thrilled to have with me Enoh Ebong, the Director of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, or TDA, or USTDA. And it flies a little bit under the radar amongst federal agencies, but when you shine a light on it, what you discover is that it has some amazing outcomes and wonderful returns for taxpayers. So welcome. So great to have you with us here today.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you again for having me.
Thrilled to have you. And one of the most amazing statistics about the USTDA is that for every dollar you program, you get $136 worth of U.S. exports that are resulting from that. That's an amazing result, but help us understand that, make it tangible with an example.
Absolutely. And if I may just start by putting that phenomenal result in some context. So USTDA is a foreign assistance agency with a rather unique dual mission. We are tasked to support the development of high quality, sustainable infrastructure in the sectors of clean energy, transportation, digital infrastructure, and healthcare infrastructure. But at the same time, to promote the exports, U.S. exports, to the projects that we support, thereby supporting jobs in the United States. So we are focused on not only promoting development of sound quality infrastructure, but supporting U.S. jobs and exports to those projects. And so in terms of how we get to that wonderful result of, for every grant dollar that we provide, $136 in exports, we are focused on grant funding to support feasibility studies, technical assistance, and pilot projects. These are the project preparation tools that do two things. One, they make sure that these projects are well designed and technically put together in a way that is sound and sustainable. And secondly, they help our project sponsors attract financing. So with that background, I will also point out that project preparation is a rather long-term kind of endeavor. So, the results that we see might be anything from 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 years hence. The example I would like to give to help to perhaps sort of demonstrate the work actually focuses on a project that we provided feasibility study for in 2008 in the port city of Klaipėda in Lithuania. The Lithuanians were very interested in retaining their sovereignty and choice with respect to their energy. And so back in 2008, we supported the feasibility study of looking to see how we could build an LNG import terminal in Klaipėda. The project became live and operative in 2014 and actually became really critical after the unprovoked aggression of the Russian war in Ukraine, not only in supporting energy security in Lithuania, but in the accompanying and surrounding Baltic states, in Poland and Finland. So the investment, the study cost $800,000 approximately. Hundreds of millions of exports in LNG from 4 states, from companies in 4 states here in the United States, in addition to the technical expertise that was exported to stand up this project. So for not really extensive investment through grant funds, we see this amazing return to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars of exports from the United States, helping to support our jobs. I look forward to years hence when the agency is looking at the investments we're making now, mostly in clean energy and renewable energy, in everything from, I would say, nuclear power in Eastern Europe, offshore wind in Philippines, utility battery scale in Southern Africa, to really see what the sort of results are in terms of the investments we're making today.
And the fun thing about them is that they just get better over time. It's a gift that keeps on giving.
It really does.
I describe infrastructure as sort of the conduits through which future commerce flows. In the case of LNG, it's clear, but in others, it's the upgrades, it's the maintenance, it's the repair parts. All of those just means future, perhaps exports for U.S. Now that doesn't happen unless we connect an American, supplier wanting to supply something with a need over in another country and in oftentimes emerging markets. Explain how your people on the ground and your reverse trade missions help to connect those two together.
Absolutely, Mark. And you've hit it when you talk about people and people on the ground. We could not do what we do without the really amazing staff, frankly, here in the headquarters in Roslyn, Virginia, who help to develop our projects, but also with the staff that we have on the ground in the markets that we are most active. I truly believe that by having a staff that understands both the landscape in terms of the countries and USTDA's mission, you really are getting to the perfect blend where your project development is going to be on point and really relevant to the stakeholders on the ground. So we have what we call locally employed staff. We call them our country representatives in key markets of the Indo-Pacific, so in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam and Thailand, and soon to be in Philippines. In sub-Saharan Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and also in South Africa, and then in Latin America and Caribbean, in Brazil. So they are the face of USTDA. I often see when I visit some of our projects, and our missions and ambassadors are so kind to host us and to bring along the stakeholders, private sector and public sector. The people that they know and they recognize and are most popular are our overseas staff, our country representatives who are beating the ground for projects and who know these interlocutors really well. So the people are a huge, huge part, our people, of developing the right projects. I would also point to our colleagues at posts, missions and consulates overseas, our ambassadors, who do an amazing job of building relationships, of helping to provide that ecosystem where agencies like ours can work. So at post, I work with the economic unit of the State Department or the Foreign Commercial Service. I think commercial diplomats do an amazing job, and they help to connect us as well. And then I'd also talk about the interagency connections as well. And those are most relevant to the reverse trade missions that you mentioned. So this is a tool that we use to bring delegations from the countries that we're operating in to the United States, not just to see the technologies and the goods and services, which we hope they will procure, and when you see our result, we know that they do, but also to meet our regulators and our policymakers and our financiers. Because for infrastructure really to be built and developed sustainably, you really do need the environment where it's going to be possible. And that involves regulation, it involves policy. And so we make sure that our delegations see not just the technologies, goods and services, but the rest of the ecosystem that's so critical. A good example is a fairly recent RTM that we had in the cybersecurity space, where we brought a delegation of financial institutional members as well as regulators from South Africa who were interested in shoring up their resiliency in the cybersecurity space, particularly where we're talking financial security. And we brought them to meet both an array of innovative US technologies in this space, but also regulators working and policymakers very much in this space. Not long after, one of those institutions made a sizable investment in US technology to help shore up their systems. And so it's those kinds of connections that we hope to make. We are fairly successful in making. And really, though, it comes right down to making those people-to-people connections possible, both for the stakeholders in the countries that we're supporting, working in, and with respect to our US companies, our US policymakers, and our regulators.
Getting them all together, I'm sure, makes a big difference in making the projects work. Now, USTDA does not do the financing. They work in the early stages, and it's really there where people are making design choices and technology choices. Help us understand why it's so important to be involved with those feasibility studies and that technical assistance and the pilot projects that you run. How are they so important to ultimately the success of the project?
I think it's really important, particularly where we're trying to bring in the private sector, the people who are innovating, creating, building technologies into what sometimes are difficult markets. I particularly think of our companies, and especially small and medium-sized companies, because we want to serve the array. Excellent ideas and innovations aren't the purview only of the largest companies. Much of our innovation, much of our job creation happens at the small, medium-sized space. So for companies across the board, there are some challenges in entering emerging economies. Sometimes the regulatory environment might not be quite set. Sometimes our strategic competitors are setting standards that work for them, don't necessarily work for anybody else. Sometimes there's risk in also just understanding how to do business in the country that we are targeting. And I would say also that really when we come back to standards and setting them and the ability to level the playing field so that we can compete. This is all about competition in many ways. We're in a global environment where the competition is stiff. It makes a difference, and I think it makes sense to come in at that early stage where we are understanding and testing the environment, but also exposing the project sponsors to what it is that we have to offer. So US companies do the feasibility studies, the technical assistance, and the pilot projects. And so that ability to level the playing field, I think, is very important in us getting in early. So I would summarize it both in terms of the risk to companies in some of these markets, the disproportionately high cost of project preparation if you're a small company, sometimes a lack of clarity over the return on investment, and the fact that there are legitimate spaces where the US government, as other governments do, but where the US government can participate in leveling the playing field. And I will say the way in which we level the playing field, really, I think, and I may be a bit biased in this regard, but it adds value for everybody. So I think those are the things I would point to with respect to the import of doing this early project preparation work, not to speak of the ability of opening up projects for financing and making sure that they're well-designed projects as well.
I'm sure it makes a huge difference, because if you come in too late and the table's already set with somebody else having the main plate, it's hard for America to come in. And if we just get a chance to show the wonderful products that we do have,
absolutely,
I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. As I often say, if we don't set the standards, somebody else will, and it will make it harder for us to get in those markets.
Absolutely. Now, we got that project plan, design, we've got some great American products included in it. Now we need to get it financed. Now,
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about how you connect with DFC, XM, and others.
Absolutely. It's really, I love the way we work, because we work at all levels, and we work quietly but effectively. So there is a very active interagency in which at the working level, at the principal level, we do come together periodically. Our staffs are working to share project pipelines. I think it's really important to understand what each other is working on so that we can see the opportunities to connect. Certainly at USTDA, when projects are being brought forward to approve, there's always a section in which we talk about whether this is something that DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, or the Export-Import Bank of the United States, EXIM, could finance. And in addition, USTDA has the flexibility to be able to prepare projects that can be financed by multilateral institutions, by private banks, by public sector entities. So we always have an eye to that. I would say that specifically with respect to our interagency and our sister agencies, we have a very deliberate method of sharing the project pipelines. So we want to know that what we're working on, they could finance. And we also want to know if they are working on projects, if they're financing projects that need particular assistance, that aren't quite ready in certain areas where it could very much benefit by USTDA's assistance. I think, again, examples are helpful, are illustrative. So I'll give one focused in the Latin America Caribbean region. This is a project, the first utility-scale geothermal project in Honduras. And it was the western part of Honduras. And a USTDA feasibility study helped to bring a private sector developer. What they needed was financing. And so we were able to work with DFC. It was then OPIC, now DFC. And I shouldn't use acronyms. OPIC is the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which has, through the BUILD Act, is now the Development Finance Corporation. They came in with financing of $135 million, which enabled the project to be stood up. The project was built with technology, goods, and services from 70 U.S. companies across 17 states. And it brought about 35 megawatts of electricity to over 100,000 homes in Honduras. So talk about touching a couple of important points. One, building up an economic foundation. Because once you have power, once you have electricity, you can develop, you can do business. So touching on that in a country like Honduras, helping to keep people there as opposed to moving elsewhere. Then being able to use our sister agencies to do the financing and opening up the ability of our companies to enter that market, to support jobs in 17 states. I think is a good example of how we work together, how we bring in the private sector, how we support jobs here at the same time as having impact development-wise in overseas markets.
It's a great story, great example. Now, a lot of times you've mentioned this is a very competitive process. You know, we're not the only ones that thought that maybe we ought to think about helping our exporters help other countries. There's a number of other countries around the world competing. China's very aggressive. Give us an example of how in a very strategic project, it's a large scale where USTDA made a difference and brought it home for a win for American exporters and also made sure that a developing country was getting what they really needed. Absolutely,
and I think this is such a critical question. The competition with China is real. We see it in a number of instances. I think I'll give you an example in the sort of digital infrastructure space and focus on subsea cables because, as you know, they are critical, highly essential, highly sensitive in terms of the amount of data that is coursing through these cables. So a few years ago, a U.S. company, it's a New Jersey-based company called Subcom, LLC, was bidding to support a subsea cable running from France through to Singapore around the coast of Africa,
It's a long
huge,
ways.
massive project. And they were up against HMN Technologies, formerly known as Huawei Marine. These were the companies that were battling it out. And this was another excellent example of U.S. whole-of-government approach. They received advocacy from the Department of Commerce. And we came in to say to 5 of the countries that were involved in the selection of which contractor was going to be chosen, we identified them, we offered them training. And this is, I think, what distinguishes our method of assistance. We're not looking to enrich people. We're looking to provide a sustainable approach to their investment. So what do we offer? We offer training. We said to these 5 countries, Djibouti, Egypt, the Maldives, Mauritius, and Sri Lanka, to say those countries that could do with the training assistance. If you select this U.S. company, we will train your people so that this investment sustains over time. Well, they chose Subcom. Again, I think our whole of government approach was instrumental in all of this. Our ambassadors, Commerce Department, other agencies looking at what they could do to help. But we were so pleased that this U.S. company that is going to manufacture this technology in the United States, so supporting jobs, is really the vehicle by which this very highly sensitive technology and the protection of the data that goes through it, we feel is a trusted vendor. And our partners and allies think so too. So this is a really clear example of when our companies are coming head to head with state-owned enterprises of the Chinese and others, where we can practically and realistically and with results provide assistance. And so I think it's a great tool that we have and that we really do use to give our companies in a way that is completely within the rules and boundaries of international legal frameworks, the advantage.
And that's a great news story from many dimensions. Number one, U.S. jobs. But when you think about submarine cables, and frankly, not everybody thinks about submarine cables on a regular basis,
Right.
but that's how data transfers across countries.
Right.
And a lot of times that's sensitive data. A lot of times it's, not just strategic from an economic perspective, but from a security perspective. And
Right.
somebody else has perhaps an ability to hear that as it goes across other than us. We could be at risk. So it's a huge issue. And the training is so good because when you think about distinguishing what America's approach to coming into an emerging market is versus others, sometimes others, like China, might bring in their own people, do all the
Right.
work, leave, and
Right.
and the people on the ground left there really have no idea how to run it.
Right.
So what a branding of the distinction between the way we come. We want to leave your country better off and your people better prepared to take care of their own issues.
Absolutely.
And this is a great way of doing that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it just, my last question is when America shows its heart and does something like this and leaves behind opportunities for the citizens there, greater uplift in their economy that will create more jobs and have better services, better quality of life, with the uplift of the opportunity for the people, I would hope that we also have an increased standing for the U.S. Explain some experience you've had where you've really seen what USTDA has done that has really left the people with a higher standard view of what the United States is.
Wow, thank you for that question. I love that question because I've had the opportunity to actually visit a number of our projects overseas, and I've seen the impact, and it makes such a difference. I avidly take in and read as much information as I can, and the projects are presented, and I'm well educated on our projects. But I have to tell you, when you go and visit and see the impact, it makes all the difference in the world, to my true understanding. So I'll choose an example of a fairly recent site visit. And I love this example because, again, it shows how we are all in the US government, across agencies, working together. So this is in Kenya. I was recently in Nairobi, and I went to visit a project. It's a wind farm project in Kipeto. It's called the Kajiado County, sort of 90 minutes outside of Nairobi. But this is a project that is in a couple of phases. The first phase of this project was financed by the Development Finance Corporation. USAID helped the project developers with an amazing biodiversity action plan. So how to ensure that this project was developed, keeping in mind the environment, keeping in mind all of the stakeholders that would be a part of this project. So where USTDA comes in is, again, making the project that much more sustainable over time by looking at this third phase, not only in adding more megawatts, but looking at battery storage in a way that will even out and make more reliable and consistent the energy that is derived from the wind. So what is amazing about this project is the way it has been developed. So the Maasai of Kenya who inhabit this space are people that don't have the same concept of land ownership that we do. But in order to develop this project, the finances and were insistent to the developers, obviously, that there has to be some understanding of who owns the land. It has to be titled and registered. And so do you know that we spent, along with the project developers, we, DFC, and USAID and others, working to understand what was of import to this community, how to engage the community to communicate around this, and how to build what was needed, but only after the community understood and saw how it would be of benefit. So number one, from the get-go, the way that we are developing and engaging in this, because let's be clear, it's a commercial endeavor, but it's a commercial endeavor that takes into account the community. The other thing that they did was to build a trust fund so that proceeds of this, a percentage of the proceeds, could go back into the community, respecting their system of elders and community decision-making to decide how to use these proceeds to better the community. I was so impressed that as I toured, I met the lead ornithologist of this entire project, who, by the way, was a Kenyan from the region and had been doing this for 27 years. So he was completely vested in preserving the environment. And what was so interesting to me, this part of Kenya is the home to one of the rarest types of vultures that exist. There are only 22,000 of them in the entire world. And a lot of them are here. And, you know, obviously a wind farm, there are concerns. And so again, in developing this project with US assistance, they engaged with NGOs and environmentalists who were focused on this to figure out the best way to preserve the avian population in this area. And they actually developed, through the work of the Kenyans themselves, the lead ornithologist, Dominic, I remember his name because he was very engaged and I just was so impressed. But they developed an entire new system to actually observe, using the Maasai skills of distance observation and ability to see through their planes at distance. So using those skills, a system of shutting down the turbines when through radio communication, the presence of this vulture or group of them is clear. So they came up with a whole new system. Wow. And then at the end, I was privileged to be able to visit the home of one of the elders in this community. Lovely woman, and I asked her, what has this meant to you? What is different for you? And I said this as I was standing in her cement home with solar panels on the roof, where previously the homes had been mud and wattle, which would leak when it rained. So you were in the physical space where you felt that was part of the answer. But what she said to me was, well, everything is better. Everything is better. That just had such an impact on me. And I think it is so demonstrative of how we in the United States approach this issue of development, of infrastructure development. We come in partnership. We come understanding that you have to build trust. We come understanding that there's mutual benefit and our collective prosperity in the picture. So I couldn't be prouder, really, to be associated with this kind of thoughtful, respectful, but commercial. I keep coming back to, this is commercial. This is not fun. We are doing business here. And I have to say, I think our partners understand that and they value it. And certainly it's been our experience at USTDA as we proceed, keeping in mind these values, coming in a way that we know we have a great deal to offer. We also know that we have a great deal to exchange information on, to learn, so that what we bring is truly the best in implementation, the best in action, the best in results. So, I don't know, Capetto Wind Farm, that whole experience just really underscored for me how we work, and it's something to be very proud of.
It certainly is something to be proud of, and I think that phrase, everything is better, sums it all up, because she probably recognized that everything is better for the commercial partners and everything is better for U.S.
Right.
by having this relationship within the country.
Right.
But everything is better for the environment. Everything is better for the wildlife.
Right.
And not everybody, not all of our competitors are taking that holistic approach.
Right.
And everything is better for the country that we leave behind. But I also like that story because a project built upon itself. And you know what?
Yes.
Battery technology is going to get better. And we'll probably have an opportunity 2, 3, 4, 5 years to bring back some different battery that makes it even better.
Even better.
Or wind turbines will get more efficient.
Exactly.
And that's where I say we just need to be there more. We just need to be present more, doing more of these projects around the world. And it's important for them, but Americans need to know it's important for us.
Absolutely.
To do as well. So
Absolutely.
very much appreciate your time with us here today. Again, we have been with Enoh Ebong, the Director of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency from Wilson Center. I'm Mark Kennedy, and I thank you for attending to our program today.